Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're zeroing in on Haile Selassie, Ethiopia's last emperor.
Right. And most people know the standard picture, don't they? The
Mm.
modernizer, the global statesman.
Exactly. But what if there's more to it? What if that polished image hides, well, some darker stuff?
That's what we're exploring. We're going beyond that familiar narrative today.
We're looking into the controversies, the dark secrets that often get glossed over.
Yeah, we've looked at quite a few historical accounts, and they paint a, let's say, much more complex picture than the usual one.
So our goal is to sort of dissect his rule, from the myths he built around his power.
To the harsh realities many people faced under him.
Right. So for you listening, the mission here is to get past that kind of one-dimensional view.
We want you to really grasp the complexity, the contradictions in Haile Selassie's legacy.
We'll touch on how he got power, the Italian invasion, huge impact there, that awful famine.
His relationship with the military, which was tricky. Then there are the family scandals, international politics.
And, of course, how it all ended, his downfall and that lingering mystery.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with how he actually got to the throne and the image he projected.
The official story is pretty powerful, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. This direct line from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, that gives you instant legitimacy, almost divine status.
Absolutely. And it definitely shaped how people saw him, both in Ethiopia and, internationally, especially for the Rastafarian movement.
But that's the official story. What was really happening? What were the political machinations?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. You have this powerful myth on one hand,
Right?
and on the other, some very shrewd political maneuvering.
Yeah.
His rise wasn't just handed to him after Empress Zuditu died.
No.
No. He had to navigate these really complex power dynamics, getting the aristocracy on side, securing military support.
So outplaying rivals.
Exactly. Sidelining potential threats. It shows that while the image was all about divine right, the reality involved careful calculation. Strategic alliances were key.
So less about birthright, more about political skill then.
A combination, perhaps, but the skill was definitely crucial.
And dissent. If people pushed back against this consolidation of power.
Well, the accounts suggest he used patronage to build loyalty, for sure, but opposition, that was often suppressed. Firmly.
Ruthlessly, even.
Some sources suggest that, yes, it definitely challenges that image of just a benevolent, universally loved figure. It's more complicated.
Okay. Let's shift gears. 1935, Italy invades. That had to be a defining moment, a real test.
Oh, absolutely. Mussolini's invasion was brutal, and Ethiopian forces fought hard, but Italy had the technological edge.
Which led to the occupation. And Selassie went into exile, right, in England?
He did. And that exile raises some difficult questions about his leadership during that crisis.
Like, did he do enough to rally international support? His League of Nations speech is famous, but did it actually do anything concrete for Ethiopia?
That's the debate. The League was pretty toothless in the 30s, let's be honest. But some historians argue, could he have done more? Was exile the only option? Did his absence maybe even help the Italians in a way? Demoralize the resistance?
That's a tough accusation. Collaboration, even inadvertently.
It's a contentious point. Some analyses suggest his focus on diplomacy from afar, rather than maybe leading resistance closer to home, might have given Italy space to consolidate.
Wow.
And that failure to stop the invasion, the occupation, it left a deep scar. A lasting wound on Ethiopian memory and, raised doubts about his wartime leadership.
A very deep wound. Okay, fast forward to the early 70s. The Great Famine, another huge turning point, probably the thing that really led to his downfall.
It really was. 1973-74, a terrible human tragedy.
Right.
But the historical accounts, they strongly point towards the government's response or lack of one making things much, much worse.
It's hard to fathom aid being available but not getting to starving people. The mismanagement claims are severe.
They are. The main criticism is about basically hoarding international aid, failing to get it to the worst-hit regions effectively.
Hoarding, while people starved.
That's the allegation. And what makes it worse is the evidence that they tried to cover it up.
Cover up the famine.
Downplay how bad it was, seemingly to protect the emperor's image internationally.
Image over people's lives.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
And that inaction, that perception, it fueled incredible anger, especially in the countryside where people were dying.
I can only imagine. So the famine wasn't just nature, it was a leadership failure.
A critical failure, yes.
Yeah.
It showed a real disconnect between the regime and the people suffering.
And that disconnect must have fed into unrest, which brings us to the military. He initially relied on them, modernized some units, but that relationship soured.
It did. And the 1960 coup attempt is fascinating here.
Even though it failed.
Yes, because it was a huge warning sign. Deep dissatisfaction within the military ranks.
About what specifically?
Officers were frustrated, slow pace of modernization, economic inequality that just wouldn't go away, lack of advancement opportunities.
And Selassie didn't really address those things.
Not effectively. And by not dealing with those grievances, he kind of let them fester, created fertile ground for future opposition. That coup attempt showed loyalty wasn't unconditional.
Right. So the seeds for 74 were sown way back then.
Pretty much.
And then the Derg, this Marxist military committee, they finally take over in 74. But it wasn't out of the blue. Many of them were former allies, weren't they?
Yeah, that's the ironic part. Many Derg leaders had been part of the system. Beneficiaries, even.
So what turned them? What drove the betrayal?
Years of frustration, really. Perceived stagnation, the emperor resisting real reforms, and the corruption. It was pervasive.
Ah, corruption again. That seems like a recurring theme.
It really does. And the famine was the last straw. It exposed the regime's weakness and gave the Derg the popular backing they needed.
So it was a mix of things. Unmet hopes, anger over corruption and inequality, and then the famine disaster.
Exactly. A perfect storm, in a way.
And you mentioned corruption. It wasn't just in the military or government bureaucracy, right? There were rumors about the imperial family itself.
Yes, this gets into the murkier side of things. Less documented, more based on accounts and oral history.
Like what?
Well, suggestions of serious power struggles within the family, intense rivalries, even whispers about involvement in the deaths of rivals within the family.
Wow. Like who?
The speculation around his own son, Crown Prince Asfal Wassen's death, for instance. It's never been proven, of course. But those kinds of rumors created this atmosphere of suspicion and intrigue right at the top.
A far cry from the official image of unity.
Very far. And beyond those darker rumors, there was the more tangible stuff, financial corruption.
Bribery, embezzlement.
Allegations were widespread. Bribery, land grabbing by officials, advisors, even family members siphoning off state money.
And the impact of that.
It drained resources, obviously, but it also made the gap between the elite and ordinary people even wider. More resentment building up. It just undermined the whole idea of progress he was trying to project.
So that image of progress was being hollowed out from the inside by corruption?
You could certainly argue that.
Okay, let's shift to the world stage. He was a big deal internationally. Founding the OAU, Organization of African Unity, that's significant.
Undeniably. A major achievement, his commitment to Pan-Africanism. But international politics is never simple, is it?
No.
Especially during the Cold War.
Yeah.
Ethiopia's foreign relations. They were complex.
How so? The U.S. alliance, for example.
Right. Aligning with the U.S. brought crucial aid, military and economic. But you could see it as just pragmatic self-interest.
Which maybe clashed a bit with his public anti-colonial stance.
Potentially, yeah. There's a tension there.
Right.
Real politic versus ideology.
And what about the Israel connection? That feels like something kept very quiet.
It does. There's historical evidence suggesting a kind of secret relationship. Military support from Israel to Ethiopia.
In exchange for what?
Likely it was a covert deal. Israeli military aid in return for Selassie's strategic backing in the region.
So, hidden alliances, strategic partnerships, not always public.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It adds another layer to how he operated internationally. His priorities involved navigating this complex web, some of it definitely hidden from view.
Which all brings us to the end. The overthrow in 74. The end of the monarchy. And his death. The official story died in his sleep.
Yeah, nobody really buys that.
Right. Given who overthrew him, the Derg, this brutal junta, suspicion is natural.
It is. The overwhelming belief, backed up by various accounts, is that he was killed in custody, suffocated, possibly executed.
The official line just doesn't hold water.
Not really. Not given the Derg's record and their clear aim to just erase the imperial past.
So, rumors of a planned assassination, what was the motive? Why kill him rather than just keep him locked up?
Well, he was still a powerful symbol, wasn't he?
True.
Even under house arrest, he represented the old order. The Derg likely saw him as a potential rallying point for counter-revolution. Getting rid of him was final, a way to cement their power, break completely with the past.
Makes grim sense. And then his body was exhumed years later, in the 90s.
Yes, exhumed in 92, then a state funeral later. Highly symbolic.
But did it answer the questions about how he died?
Not definitively. Too much time had passed. And knowing the Derg questions remain. Could the body have been moved, tampered with?
So no closure, really.
No independent investigation at the time means the uncertainty lingers. The suspicion of foul play, of murder, it's still very much alive in Ethiopian memory.
So quite a journey we've taken. From the grand narrative, the modernizing emperor.
To uncovering this much more complex, sometimes deeply troubling reality.
Yeah, it's a world away from that simple image. We've seen the political maneuvering, the questions around his wartime role, that horrific famine made worse by inaction.
Military discontent, palace intrigue, corruption, and then that mysterious violent end.
Exactly. And for you listening, we hope this deep dive has, provided a shortcut to understanding that complexity.
Revealing some of the less told stories, challenging those easy narratives. The main point is historical figures are rarely just one thing.
Right. Understanding them means looking beneath the surface.
Definitely.
So as you think about all this, maybe reflect on how these contradictions could exist in one person. The modernizer and the autocrat. The global statesman and the leader accused of neglecting his people during famine.
How do those things shape a legacy? What parts of his story stand out most to you now, and what does that say about power, about history, about how we remember?
It's a lot to consider.
And honestly, we've just scratched the surface here. Each of these points, his rise, the famine, his death, you could dive so much deeper.
Absolutely. So we encourage you to keep exploring, read more, and form your own informed view on this really fascinating, really controversial